book, but it's free. That's why I have this gets cut off a little when I activate PowerPoint, but it's searchuserinterfaces.com if you want to see it free, or just search for it online if you want to read it for free. Just find this start. So there we go. Okay, so I'll try not to take too long. So everybody uses search. It's kind of interesting to talk about it now. When I started looking at search quite some time ago, when I was a graduate student, it was a backwater topic. People were kind of like, that's kind of a weird area to be in. Why do you do that? So what I want to start with is, first of all, before I talk about maybe where search user interface is going, what does search look like now? And in fact, this is a picture taken from my book, which shows search results listings from InfoSeek in 1997 and from Google in 2007. And the search results don't really look too terribly different in these two cases. And you can kind of wonder, why is that? And something I argue is, this is almost like, I've got a picture very similar to Derek's picture from, oh, well, before I show that picture, this is a interface from a system that was out in 2002 called Car2. And the question is, why aren't we using this? This was a product people were trying to sell. It shows search results on the side, little documents are scattered about, there's graphics, it's trying to link things that are related to each other. So when I show this, just from this glance I've shown you, how many people think they would like to use this every day as their search tool? Raise your hand. People. We have some artists in the audience. Most people don't want to. And part of my point is it's really hard to innovate with search interfaces and create something that people really want to use every day, day in and out. And that's one reason why search interfaces haven't changed that much. And in fact, here's a picture that looks kind of like the one Derek showed. It's a red car. These are two Mustangs from '67 and around 2007 or so. And my point is sort of the outside hasn't changed very much of the car, the way cars look, and sort of how they look in the interior either. But inside, under the hood, it's completely different in this era, and that's the same for search engines. So the interface is sort of the same, although it's not a difference of 50 years. It's maybe more like 20 years, or, I mean, the technology does go back to the 60s roughly for search engines. But if you look at the hood, it's completely different what's going on. And it's gotten much more intelligent in both cases. And yeah, they've added a cup holder and actually a navigation system. Been added to both search engines and to the cars around the same time, actually, because that technology arose recently and put it in both cars and search engines. But the interface hasn't changed that much. People are not changing as fast. What they can deal with isn't changing all that quickly. But what we can do under the hood to make things smarter is changing very rapidly. So it's really, really hard to make changes to a search engine that people can deal with. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I talk about why a lot in my book. But what I do want to talk about are two things in this talk briefly. One is, what are some of the properties that make a new design for search engines successful? And I talk about designing search for humans, because a lot of times software engineers or computer scientists come up with cool ideas like that Car2 thing I showed you that really just are not acceptable to people. And then I want to talk about a couple trends that I think are on the horizon that actually will eventually take off. So, designing search for humans. Consider the human. A human has feelings, a human uses language and relies on memory, and a human is sociable. And how does that play into search interfaces? Well, feelings. This is really not something that comes up in very many conference papers about search engines or search interfaces, believe it or not. But yet, it's very important. And there's different aspects of feelings when we're using interfaces. Aesthetics can impact our feelings. Emotional stages, there's emotional stages to search, which I'll talk about. And there's this notion of flow. And since this is sort of artists in the room, I think this is going to be kind of obvious to some of you. But it's not obvious to engineers a lot of the time. They design new search interfaces. So there has been a little bit of work on emotions in search interfaces. It was really a side effect of looking at the stages of search. This is work by Kofau on informational stages. And this was primarily, and unfortunately the slides are cut off a little bit, but this is primarily studying students who were writing essays. So they had to write essays for school. So this is not your quick look up, what movie is playing tonight, but a more difficult search task. So they had to maybe write a thesis for their class. And so there's these stages of initiation, figure out what you're going to write about, and then selection, select your topic, then explore, look online, or sometimes it didn't used to be online, but now look online, try to find the different topics in the library catalog or on the web. Then formulate your thesis, what are you going to write about, collect the information now that you have your thesis, and then finally figure out, you also formulate your hypothesis, collect the information, and then present your results. And associated with these, it turns out there's emotions oftentimes, especially when you're a less experienced researcher. So there can be uncertainty and apprehension at the initiation phase. Then there's confusion, uncertainty, doubt, and frustration sometimes at the selection phase. Then, after you start deciding where you're going to go, there can be kind of optimism after deciding. Then confidence starts to dawn as the hypothesis starts to formulate. The reason I have an asterisk here is a lot of students never get to this phase, unfortunately, and don't succeed at writing the thesis. Then the confidence grows as the collection happens, and finally relief and satisfaction or disappointment at the presentation of the results. So again, this often isn't talked about. It's certainly thinking about these feelings is not designed into our search interfaces today in research. And I don't know how to do it either, so I'm no better than anyone else, but I think it's something that we want to think about as we design interfaces. Aesthetics, again, there's artists in the room, so you obviously know the importance of this, but often interfaces are designed about taking into account. But there have been studies showing that if with a more aesthetically pleasing design, people will stick at something longer, even if an interface is technically less efficient, it'll feel more efficient, and so on. And small details matter. So there was this older work done with early on in Google with the ad on the side where they showed that like a thin little box that kept the ad as integrated as part of the page made people more likely to look at it than if it was separated with a heavy line. And of course, this has now progressed. That was very early days, and this has been studied in spades since then. But they were early to look carefully at balancing the white space with the content, and understanding that, balancing font, color, weight, shape, and so on to make an integrated experience on a search page. This is very important, in part because reading is very cognitively demanding process, and text search on documents is just all about text. And we saw a cartoon try to make it visual, but that actually just makes it harder to understand. So if you're confronted with a lot of words, the layout is so important. Of course, people that do typesetting know this. Laying out the search results, where to place what, especially now when we're mixing multimedia content, is just so important. And it's a whole science how to lay, I'm sorry, thank you. It's a whole science figuring out what content to lay where when you're mixing, say, video content, images, ads, sports scores, maps. There's actually a lot of work going on about how to intermix that information. It's not a solved problem yet. I think this is an aesthetically pleasing design. This is an Artists Rising website, which uses what's called faceted navigation. I think you all are probably pretty familiar with this sort of design now, where you see different categories listed with the number of items associated with each subcategory, how many paintings have a medium of type photography versus watercolor or other kinds of paint, that sort of thing. This is actually a relatively new, you see this with shopping websites, online catalogs. How many people are familiar with these sorts of interfaces where you see how many hits with the numbers next to them and so on? So this actually came out of my research group, this main design. It was co-invented at the same time with a company called Deca. And this is, I would say, the only other major search interface design that's taken hold besides the straight list links. And the idea was for a website search where you have one kind of content and only one kind, trying to make it very easy to navigate with categories. And it's because it follows various principles of flow. You also want to have the aesthetic design. But the importance of flow is to show people next steps. Where can you go next without getting lost, without feeling cluttered? And the notion of flow is to allow people to be both challenged, but not challenged too much. Allow them to do what they need to do without making things too easy so they're not bored. So you want to find this sweet spot between something that's too easy and something that's too hard that lets you get your work done. You have your tools right there, ready to hand, to let you do what you need to do. So with those query previews, as we call them, that show you exactly where you can go next, but let you choose flexibly where you go next, not channeling you into one choice and only one choice, giving you a set of choices that make sense. Faster navigation lets you do that sort of thing. Interfaces that give you flow, that show you where to go next, give you hints, don't constrain you too much, but don't show you too many choices. So properties of search interfaces with flow: support engagement where there's no blockages, there's easy reversal of actions, and the next steps seem to suggest themselves. And you want to provide memory aids because there's a lot to keep track of when you're searching. You want to support what we call recognition over recall. It's easier to recognize someone's face than to remember their name, that sort of thing. It's true with language. Foreign language, it's easier to read or hear someone speak a foreign language than to generate the words yourself. And that's true for search as well. And having just little aids to give you hints about what you should type is easier than having to think of things yourself. Like we see here, little hints about what to put in the search box, or little hints about, this is PubMed, little hints about related terms to search for, or Amazon, where we see people that have searched for this also search for that. And as we all, very popular and useful interface design, this suggestions, the auto-suggest and related queries, which has been proven to be very useful. Okay, so I'm going to skip through some of this. Faster navigation puts it all together because it shows you next steps. If it's designed well, you have aesthetically pleasing design and provides memory aids. And that's why it's been a very successful design. And this is the faster navigation interface we came up with for the Fine Arts Museum in San Francisco. Actually, it was the test collection that we started with, actually. And it's now taken over. Okay, so what are the larger future trends? One thing I like to do is, when trying to forecast the future, is look at larger trends in technology and larger trends in society, and from that try to see what are the next likely steps, project out from these. So I don't want to bore you too much, but just there are preferences. Computer systems were designed the way they were in part because we couldn't do it the way we really wanted to. If we could have, as soon as we had computers, if we could have made them understand speech, we would have done that. The problem is we didn't know how to do that. If we could have made touch screens that you could swipe your finger across immediately, we would have done that. We didn't have the technology for it. But because people have always had preferences to talk rather than having to type, but we couldn't support it. People preferred to interact with other people, but we didn't have the ability for computers to support that. And people prefer to use natural language over keywords, but we didn't have support for that. Those are preferences we've always had as humans. But now we have technology to support this sort of thing. We have statistical analysis of very large collections of data that we didn't have before. With the web, we have behavioral data that's being captured of what people do. We didn't have that before. We didn't have speech captured in huge volumes of it that we can now build models of so that we can do better speech recognition. The same thing with user interface design has been greatly advanced by the web. In the old days, you can only see a couple pieces of software. You had to buy a piece of shrink wrap software, unwrap it, put the CD in your computer, or a floppy disk, and just see that software. There was very little innovation in software design because there were very few pieces of software to learn from. Once the web happened, there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, then hundreds of thousands of interfaces to look at and learn from, and UI design has been rapidly evolving since then because we all learn from each other. And then the social media user-generated content means there's lots of information to learn from. And these trends together are helping us create more natural interfaces. So I think that there's a trend towards spoken interchanges. There will be a trend towards spoken interchanges with our devices, especially for search. Why spoken input? Well, with phone-based devices, you have a natural microphone, and touchscreen interaction is popular, but it's very hard to type on a touchscreen. And speech recognition technology is improving now. It's not there yet. It's not perfect, so that until it is, still going to slow down spoken input and output being used as much as it will be. But there's some serious impediments, namely when you talk, it makes noise. So we still need another invention. We need a cone of silence. So we need something that when you talk, only the device hears and nothing else hears it. So I'm calling that kind of we need a noise canceling microphone that hears what you're saying, but nothing else hears it. If we had that, then I think there'd be a lot more speech input. And I don't think it's impossible, because I give this talk, I've made this claim in a lot of audiences, and every time I make it, somebody else figures out a way. Oh, you can use a vibration of your jaw, or you can do, I don't know. So I think if I give the speech often enough, we're going to have some kind of microphone to solve this problem. And I think if we have that, then we're going to have a lot more audio input. And I have other reasons for thinking this, but I probably don't have time to talk about it. But dialogue is a long-time dream of artificial intelligence, and of course, with Siri coming out, that's certainly, it's being tested. We're getting closer, though, because of this massive behavioral data that's making our models smarter, and advanced user interface design, real-time contextual information. So Siri actually came out of a project sponsored by DARPA, the Defense Research Agency. And now we see competitors coming out of Google and Android. And so I think it's just going to accelerate this ability for you to give both audio and typed input to a system that then gives feedback. I mean, I think the important thing about Siri is not only is it audio input, but there's also visual output, and you can also correct it. So it's the back and forth between the audio input and the visual output, where you actually can get web search results and so on. So it doesn't have to all be a smart entity understanding everything you say. There's a lot of sort of a backstop with the web making up for the fact that it's not understanding a lot of what you say. But people, once they can talk, they want the thing to talk back. They want it back and forth. And now that it's there and we've seen the potential, there's no going back. And that's just going to continue. Another reason I think audio input is important is that when you're reading on a web search result, reading, like I said, is very cognitively intense. There's a lot of load there. And reading and writing kind of use the same channels. But there's some evidence that if you speak rather than type, it's easier to keep track of what you're doing while you're reading. So it's another channel. And so if you actually could comment orally on what you're reading rather than typing, you can actually juggle multiple things. That's a hypothesis I have. I don't have proof of this. We've seen this with commenting on programming, on coding. It's something I'm contemplating doing some research on. So that's just sort of a hint of the future. But I actually, so keep your eyes open. I think there's going to be more spoken input with search in the future. The other main area, and then I'll finish up, is just sociability, social search. My little slogan, people are social, computers are lonely, don't personalize search, socialize it, which is also a trend we're seeing, although I don't think it'll be the way that we're seeing it on the web right now. So this is a screenshot from a piece of research that I really like, where there's a search, it's a research project, but where people have two different roles in this search system. And this guy does one thing, and he searches, and it has one algorithm. And the results of his search feed into what she does, and she does some search, and with a different algorithm, what she does feeds into what he does. So that's why I say my search feeds into your search and vice versa. Where we have smarter algorithms that don't just treat what everybody does the same way, but something that treats different roles differently and ranks the documents differently and has these things feed into each other. And I think something that's smarter about the fact that when people are working together, they're doing different things. And I think that's something that's worth investigating, just being smarter about people working together synchronously. There's also some cool work here about people collaborating, where part of this is neat because they're using a physical device, although I think that's more kind of just sort of cool for the novelty. But the part that I really like about this research is these people are trying to choose a hotel. They're going on a vacation, that's the task they were given. And they were given different constraints, like he wants a hotel with a pool, and she wants something that doesn't cost too much. And the way they've set it up, there's no way they could get all the constraints that they want together in one hotel. So they're going to have to relax some of the constraints and come to an agreement. But the neat thing is that they can each work in their own little corner and set some of the constraints in a certain way, and then the information gets combined in a collaborative area. And I really like that idea of a notion of collaboration where you have your own little space in one place and then you combine it in a central place. I'm just trying to come up with models of collaboration like that in interfaces. You just never see that. And that's not even just for search, that's just for user interfaces generally. I like this idea of trying to think more expansively about software interfaces for collaboration. And for search or for any information-intensive tasks, that's where we really need improvements on that. Because right now, they don't help at all, and you end up having to do it on paper or something like that. So I think there's some interesting things going on in the interfaces for collaboration space. And then one other little kind of fun little piece of research that was done recently is trying to get people to do richer searches. This is kind of out of the cognitive psychology or the behavioral psychology space. Is they were trying to get people to formulate these hypotheses, and they sort of showed what other people were doing, and these were actually fake bots. They weren't even real, but if they showed somebody else is showing a negative hypothesis to you, and then people were inclined to do more. So just showing, trying to make you do a richer search by showing that other people were doing it, even if it was fake, inspired you to do more. So I think that's maybe a good thing to sort of peer pressure to do better searches maybe in your future. And I think I just need to skip that because I don't have time. So in summary, future search tools will allow people to interact more naturally, I think. Speaking of viewing rather than typing and reading, I didn't go into that a lot, but I have a whole thing on that too. You may be able to interact more intelligently with other people while you're searching, and more working and playing the flow, I hope, with better user interface design. So thank you very much.
So I have questions.